Thank you for joining us for today's ABA Civil Rights and Social Justice Chair Chat. My name is Lacy Durham, and I am thrilled to welcome you to this conversation. By way of background, I serve as in-house counsel at Constellation Energy and a staunch civil rights and social advocate in my spare time. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce this next installment of our Chair Chat. These chats are unique opportunities to engage directly with the key issues at the heart of our work in civil rights and social justice, explore perspectives of our expert panelists, and spark discussions that inspire actions. Today's topic, AI and legal ethics, is more critical than ever. As we confront developments in AI and the integration into all aspects of our lives, it's essential to examine how these issues intersect with the principles of justice and equity that guide the work of the ABA. Today, we are absolutely honored to have with us Sateesh Nori, Senior Legal Innovation Strategist at Just Tech, LLC. His expertise and dedication has made him a leader in his field, and we are grateful for his willingness to share his insights with us. Without further ado, let's dive in. Please join me in welcoming Sateesh Nori to kick off the conversation. Let me tell you just a little bit more about his background. From legal aid attorney to legal tech innovator, Sateesh brings a unique perspective to the intersection of artificial intelligence and access to justice. After spending nearly 2 decades in the trenches as a housing lawyer and at legal aid offices in New York, he now bridges multiple worlds, continuing his legal aid work in various capacities. As a technology consulting firm, focuses on legal services and providers. Most notably, Sateesh is an esteemed author. We're going to talk about his books, and we will explore the ethical, regulatory, and professional responsibilities that arise as artificial intelligence reshapes the legal landscape. From the duty of competence in the age of automation to the evolutionary contours of the unauthorized practice of law, his work brings together 2 trends that have shaped his career: AI innovation and legal ethics. He has previously written on topics such as Rule 1.8, which involves conflicts in client relationships, and Rule 1.16, the termination of representation, and has spent years studying the moral and practical dissemination of the unauthorized practice of law rules, especially as they affect access to justice. Now he will bring his expertise and experience into a dialogue as we propound questions raised by AI systems in our everyday practice. Who is responsible when AI goes wrong? How do we preserve human judgment? What happens when fiduciary duties, when clients start with bots? All of these questions and more we will explore. I'll just jump right into it. Please welcome Sateesh Nori. Sateesh, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Lacy. It's really my pleasure. Really excited to have this conversation with you.
Well, I'll just jump into some of the questions. We often hear about the harms of AI and the need to reform, but what progress have you seen on the ground when it comes to reducing harm and promoting economic justice?
Yeah, Lacy, that's a great question. And the starting point for me is where most people engage or interact with the law. And in this country, unfortunately, 92% of low-income American civil justice problems are going unaddressed every year. In most places in America, there's probably 1 lawyer for every 10,000 people who need that lawyer. And on the chopping block at the federal level right now is the funding for Federal Legal Services Corporation money. So I think it's really important to frame the problem from the perspective not of lawyers, but of average Americans who need lawyers, who have problems that they need legal help for. And so if you take that perspective as a starting point, you think, well, what tools do we have available to us? And how can these tools be deployed to give people information? And if you think about the way AI has evolved, it's evolving very, very quickly. And so for lawyers like us, it's really convenient sometimes to say, oh, it doesn't work exactly right at this moment, or it made this one mistake in this context, or these lawyers misused it and came up with a case that didn't really exist, and they filed that in court. But I think if you take a reasonable view of the technology, you'll see that it's evolving so quickly. What we see as problems right now or errors are going to go away very, very soon. And I've already seen that in just 2 years of working with this technology, is that these errors, these ethical issues that may come up are going away. And it's up to us to say, how do we make the law more available? How do we make it a principle of democracy that every last person in America has access to legal information? Because the laws belong to us. The lawyers are just facilitating access to those laws, but the law doesn't belong to lawyers. And so, it's really great that the ABA is talking about these issues, the organization that represents, the rank and file lawyers in America. We need to really reframe the question.
Oh, so I absolutely love that. Reframing the question, how do you think AI, I'm sorry, will affect the work of everyday attorneys, right? Legal service attorneys, especially those who are engaged in pro bono or legal aid work. We'll shift and talk about those who are using it in their everyday practice in a different setting in due order. But how do you think that this will impact everyday legal service attorneys?
Yeah, I think, again, the framing is so important. And so, first, we need to know about the facts. There's probably 10,000 legal services attorneys all across the country who serve, tens of millions of people. So it's an impossible mission that we've undertaken to try to deliver legal access to all of these people. The next thing that I would say is that we exist primarily to resolve this gap. We don't exist purely to exist as legal services, right? We exist because there's a huge problem. And
Mhm.
then you take the tools that we have available, things that can translate laws or statutes or legal help in any language. These tools that work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Tools that can make videos, that can make explainers, that can chat with people in their native language at any reading level. And so, sitting from the perspective of a legal services attorney and manager, I would say we've got to use these tools and we've got to apply them to reach people who aren't being reached right now. We can't just be content and say we help who we can help. Everybody else, that's not our problem. We can't solve that problem. And so when you start there, then you move to the next step. Well, how does it change? What are we going to do differently? Well, there's this thing that I've heard a lot. It's called thinking versus thunking. A lot of times, what we're doing is we're thunking, we're worrying about all of the nitty gritty, the nuts and bolts. How do I answer my emails? How do I write that letter to my opposing counsel? How do I schedule all of the things that I have to do? How do I make sure my clients have language access when they get to court? How do I point the person who's seeking my help in the right direction? And that stuff can be really draining. And I'm not even talking about the grant writing and the reporting and the administrative stuff and the HR stuff and the hiring and the payroll and the copier is broken and the email system is down. All of these things are so draining. They take up so much of our time. And so there's this thing that I call the 80-20 inversion, which is that using AI, we can offload all of that tedious stuff that we hate to do. And instead of spending only 20% of our time on the meaningful work, we can spend
Mhm.
80% of our time on the meaningful work. And I want each and every one listening to ask themselves, what did you think being a lawyer was going to be like when you were younger, when you were in college, even when you were in law school? Did you think it would be the way it is right now, the way you work right now? Sometimes people say, oh, we don't want to replace lawyers with robots. That's not fair. to the clients. And my answer sometimes is, we're already robots. What are we doing right now that's really human? Not much, right? And so how do we flip that equation? And one way to look at AI is it's a way to free us from our screens. We're always looking at our phones, our tablets, our computer screens. That's not really legal work. That's just moving the thing around, pushing paper. The legal work should be interfacing with a person in real life, counseling someone, being on our feet in a courthouse or an administrative proceeding, helping someone walk through a process that's complicated, getting someone to that solution. So I think really, how does work change with AI? We can actually harness this and say, let's flip it. Let's do the stuff that we really want to do, that's motivating, that's rewarding. And then the other thing I'd say is, like, lawyers aren't happy now. So why are we defending the status quo? We are among the most depressed group of working people that there is. We have high rates of suicide and depression and substance abuse. So why are we all defending the status quo? It's a miserable way that we're working right now. And instead, let's do the work that's like face-to-face, human-centered, counseling, negotiating, and empathetic. Those are the things that we can do with AI. And that's just kind of a big picture view of it.
So I love that. What I particularly love about AI is exactly what you said. It frees you up to actually do the important work. While
Yeah,
there are many legal aid and pro bono attorneys willing to champion the cause, there's still not enough, right?
no,
And so
no.
I love the fact that AI can help automate, help streamline, help reach people ordinarily who we would not be able to reach. And it would free attorneys up to really do more meaningful, impactful work. So tell me, where do you think, if you are just a novice person, where do you go to responsibly start leveraging AI? And then after that, I want to turn into some of the more pressing issues about trends that we are seeing emerging in AI in economic justice areas.
Yeah, I mean, the easiest place to start with AI is to do it in your personal life before you bring it to work. And a lot of people find this a much safer way to try it out. So one thing I tell a lot of people to try is to get ChatGPT on your phone, open
Mhm.
up your refrigerator, take a picture of the food in your refrigerator, and ask for 10 recipes that you can make with whatever is visible in your fridge. And that's like a really mind-opening experience, because then you can see how the technology can kind of almost create. People say AI isn't creating anything like a human being would. Well, this is a way to demonstrate that there is this creative potential using AI. Just by making dinner, you can use AI to figure out what you've got in your home and how you can put that on the table that your family will eat it. Another way to use it is just to plan a trip. Let's say you've got to go to a conference, an ABA conference in Washington, D.C., and you're only there for 2 days, and it's, August, so it's going to be really hot there. You can ask AI like ChatGPT or Claude and say, I'm going to be in Washington, D.C. for 2 days. I really love, Civil War history, and I love to eat, um, you know, um, Asian food. What can I do? And you can get an itinerary, almost, minute by minute for your 2 day trip to DC with recommendations on where to stay. And it looks like magic. It feels like magic. It's not magic. It's working through kind of having all this data of past queries and information about DC, and it puts it together in a way that answers your response. So start there. And then you think, okay, I have some confidence. I understand the parameters. How do I bring it to my work? One way to do it is to take care of the stuff that's not public facing, right? Before you deal with client work using AI, which is very tricky, and there's a lot to say about that in terms of confidentiality and privacy.
Mhm.
Use it for your internal stuff. Like, take your HR manual and put it into an AI chatbot, and then you can ask it questions. I know a lot of orgs in the nonprofit space, they don't have a huge HR team because it's expensive, and their HR people are inundated with questions from people about their benefits and their leave and their health plan and so on. Well, this is a very low risk way to leverage AI to create an answer bot. So when one of your employees at 2 a.m. is worried If their kid needs emergency dental care and they don't know what to do, they can engage with the bot and get an answer about like what's covered, how it's covered, what forms to fill out. Can you help me fill out those forms? I'm kind of stressed right now. It can do all that stuff. And then, the third phase, I would say, is to bring it into work that you'd love to do, but you can't do. And in the
Hmm.
nonprofit sector, there's a lot of issues that we don't have funding to take on. We don't have people to take on. And so one example in New York City is we have a right to counsel for tenants. So if you're facing eviction in New York City and you can't afford a lawyer, you're going to get one in an eviction case. But if you don't have heat, you're not going to get a lawyer. If you got big rats, you're not going to get a lawyer. If your hot water is not working, you're not going to get a lawyer because there aren't enough lawyers. So I created a bot called Roxanne AI that helps people answer questions about their repair issues. And that's a low risk area because there's no lawyers that do that work, right? It's also low risk because if the person seeking help on a repair issue gets a bad answer, they're no worse off. They're in the same place they started. So it's a low risk, high reward proposition that tackles an area that is unaddressed right now. And I'm sure everywhere across this country, people working in legal services and nonprofits and pro bono can identify an area that they wish they could do more in, that people are often asking for help with, but there's no funding, there's no staff, there's no resources. We can stand up an AI chatbot and help people at least get more than halfway to an answer
Hmm.
on their own and get that answer earlier than they would have if they had to wait for help from a lawyer to become available for them.
Excellent. I absolutely love that. And I love the comment that you made earlier about just basic translation services, right? I can't tell you how many times I've been volunteering. And the beauty of America is that there is no monolithic, right? So there are different languages, different people who rightfully need legal services. And I wish there was AI back in those days when I
Yeah,
was helping to just do basic translation to do client intake. It would have been
yeah,
so helpful. And
yeah.
so, thank you for the practical right steps in order to implement AI into one's practice. I know we started to talk about some of the risk here, but what do you think are the most urgent economic justice risks you see emerging in areas of AI, like in housing, employment, and public benefit access?
There are risks that AI will be used to further perpetuate inequalities with respect to access to housing, housing applications, employment eligibility, um, and these are real risks. Recently, I learned about prop tech, which is the industry that uses technology in property management or real estate or housing. They're using AI. And in some companies, they're using AI tools to help evict people more quickly, to file cases more quickly, to prepare legal papers more quickly. And that's really scary because this is already an extremely efficient industry, evictions, right? And so when we're seeing AI being applied by the bad guys, the people who are purely seeking profit and destroying communities, allowing gentrification, discriminating against tenants because of their race. Um, that's really, really scary. And so this is going to happen. And from our perspective, I think the answer is we can sit on our hands and just watch this train go by, or we can try to stop it. We can build our own tools. We can embrace the technology and give tenants the power to respond to legal cases more easily, translate legal papers so they understand what's happening, apply for rental assistance in a much more streamlined way without paper and pen and filling out forms and faxing them to public assistance agencies. That's still happening. People are faxing documents these days. And that means that there's going to be gaps and people are going to be evicted. They're going to lose their homes. So there's this thing I like to say often, which is we can't be enemies of the future. This stuff is
Mhm.
here, it's coming, and people are going to use it. And so we can't poke holes in it and say it isn't perfect and sit on our hands. We've got to embrace it. And, as I mentioned at the beginning, there are so many advantages. Let's roll with those advantages. And when the AI comes for us and our clients, we'll be ready for it because we can respond in kind and we can prepare for the new way that, the legal system is going to work, which is much faster.
So, I want to make sure that, we are on the side of continuing to be guardians of democracy and making sure that we are leveraging technology and AI in a fair and equitable way. What are some of the skills or frameworks that law students and legal professionals should start integrating into their practices now to address the ethical and economic consequences of AI in their legal practice? We've talked about how some of the things can go astray, but what else can we do now to make sure that ethically we're compliant? What are those think tanks out there, or are there other groups who are examining this? How can we be a part of the movement?
Yeah, I think, as lawyers, we not only tend to center ourselves, but we tend to make things much more complicated than they are.
Mhm.
And so when AI's, lately been coming to our field, we've thought we need a whole set of new rules. We need to rethink how to work with this. We need to come up with new bodies and institutions. But I would say go back to the books and read the ethical rules that we already have. For example, the duty of competence. We have to provide competent representation. And part of that means we have to be up to date on whatever's happening in our field, including technology. Also, the duty of diligence, right? We have to work hard. We have to work fast. We have to represent our clients to the best of our abilities. And in an AI world, those who don't use AI, are they really acting with diligence? Are they really acting with competence? If they're doing things the old way and it's slower and maybe more error prone. Finally, when it comes to billing and the business of law, I think
Mm.
we have a duty to communicate with our clients about how we're spending our time, right? If a matter takes 10 minutes now with AI and it used to take 10 hours, is it still ethical to bill 10 hours? And I
Mhm.
think it's not. And our clients are going to realize that too. And so the cost of lawyering is going to go down significantly. And maybe that'll impact, big law, which still relies on the billable hour, right? As the model, the unit. We've always billed time as more important than truth or justice. Why is that? Why does time count? There's this joke I read recently. How many lawyers does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is, how many can you afford?
Right. I
And that's
love that.
totally backwards, right? It should be, how many does it take to get the job done? And so I think ethically, not only do we have to learn the tech because it's going to be the standard of practice, right? Just like when online research came out, right? Initially, people were nervous about it. Is it accurate? And when I was in law school, they taught us to still go to the books and double check everything. But today, I think if you go to the books and you're not doing research online, you're committing malpractice because you're not going to get that latest case. And maybe that pocket part in your law library fell out, and it's on someone's desk in your office, or, there's a coffee stain on it and you can't read the case. you know, it
Yeah.
would be unethical. It wouldn't be competent to rely only on research in that manner. And similarly, if we're doing discovery and we have a million documents to review, AI will do that without making any mistakes, right?
Mm.
But an associate will get tired at 2 in the morning. How
Right.
many cups of coffee can they drink? They might have a cold, they might have a family wedding to go to, and they're going to rush through this project, right? There are so many human things that we don't need to necessarily make the benchmark, right? AI can do a lot of this stuff. Let's outsource that stuff. So to answer your question, I think we should look at the ethical rules that already exist.
Mhm.
We can't lie, we can't mislead the tribunal. It's already wrong to cite a case that you're making up. It doesn't matter who made the case up, right? You have to check. Also, we have a duty to supervise those we work with, both lawyers and non-lawyers, right? AI is no different. So just like you wouldn't put in a filing a memo that an intern wrote without checking it, you wouldn't
Mhm.
put a filing together that was prepared with the use of AI without checking it. Like we already have those rules that govern our practice. And so we don't need to kind of like freak out and rewrite the playbook here. Um, Probably those lawyers who are unethical before AI are going to be unethical after AI, right? It's not going to be any different. And those of us who actually practice the law and respect the law and the practice of law, it's on us to set the example and come up with the best practices for using AI. And then finally, there's this rule about having a human in the loop, like make sure some human being is
Mhm.
checking. It's still way more efficient to check something than to write it from scratch, right? So check it, make sure that it's right. And I think we're going to be fine. We don't need to collectively panic about what's going to happen to the legal profession with the use of AI.
Thank you for bringing us back to our center, right? There are already rules in place that guide us, and we shall not forget those rules. So I appreciate that nod. Sateesh, I want to talk about next. I am sure that you are a leading expert in this area. You keep track of all of the trends and all of the policy proposals. So, are there any specific policy proposals or legislative efforts or reforms in the AI and economic justice space that you're currently supporting or believe should be prioritized in this particular area, whether it's state or federal?
Sure. There are some really important AI disclosure rules. I think for better or worse, we are providing service to consumers as lawyers. And we probably need to go further in disclosing the way that we're working. Not only because it's important to be candid and honest, but also it goes back to billing too, right? We can't be cheating people out of their time and money when we're using these tools. And that requires us to kind of transform the profession and collectively admit, hey, like, how are we charging people for our time? It's totally broken. The billable hour makes the law inaccessible to the average person. Let's find new models to bill work. And in the space of economic justice, let's think about the ways in which we can use AI to counter some of the corruption, the bias, the negatives that exist in fields like housing and consumer lending and bankruptcy, in all areas of people's lives in which they're dealing with these entities. Like I said earlier, AI is coming to the corporate side, AI is coming to the business side, and we're going to be interacting with AI. But we need to be able to respond to that kind of product with our own AI tools and understand what's happening. And this doesn't mean we need to advertise that it's AI, right? I think
Right.
one of the trends that I predict is we're not going to talk about AI anymore. It's just going to
Mhm.
be the way it works. You know what I mean? So, for example, how many lawyers can explain how email works? Probably not that many, right?
Right.
I can't, and I
It
work
just
in tech.
happens.
It just happens, and it's reliable because it's worked so many times. But the first lawyer that used an email almost was disbarred
Hmm.
because his boss said, "How could you put our information out into the sky?" or whatever they thought it was. And similarly, like we're going to stop worrying about how it works, and we're going to rely on it working. And I think there's really smart people that are making sure that it works well. And that gets into the question of how legal AI works and the difference between a legal AI tool and a general ChatGPT type tool. And the answer is legal AI is trained on legal content. And that's a really
Hmm.
important distinction. Like we got to use the right tool for the right job, right? You wouldn't use a hammer to screw a nail, a screw
Right.
in. And similarly for AI, the mistakes that we see that occur are when people use the wrong tool and they expect the same result. And then they blame the tool. Um, there's this principle called Heidegger's hammer. Heidegger is a German philosopher, and he said, like, when people use tools, it becomes an extension of their hand. They don't perceive the tool as separate from them, like a hammer in your hand. It's just your hand with this new feature. And similarly, AI, can be used like that by lawyers to augment our existing abilities. And we don't necessarily see it as separate from ourselves until it breaks. And then we think, oh, look at this terrible tool. It didn't work. I blame the tool. And that's the wrong approach. So I think we've got to use these tools as extensions of our existing abilities, at least for the foreseeable future, and make sure that they're used in the right way.
So, Sateesh, I must admit, I am absolutely smitten by this conversation because I think what you're doing for me is shedding new light on how we should embrace AI. And it's coming, right? There's nothing that we can do to stop it. We can't put it back in the bottle.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. And so we need to be able to evolve with it. And particularly for crusaders and lawyers and advocates in this space, I think the ABA, and particularly the members of the section of civil rights and social justice, should really take heed to ensure that AI doesn't exacerbate, really economic inequality, and it preserves its use and its leverage as a tool for us to continue to help the masses of people who need help. And so I want to just open it up to you. Is there anything else that you can think of that we should be really focused on? This is your time to just share additional light and insight into how we can really leverage AI and technology, how we should stay true to our ethical responsibilities, but it's coming. So let's embrace it and let's do so in a meaningful way so that we continue to do the good work that we are all charged with doing.
Yeah, thank you, Lacy. I think I would borrow from this legal scholar named Richard Susskind, who wrote a book recently called How to Think About AI, and highly recommend this book. One of the things that he says is that there are two ways to think about AI. There is process thinking, and then there is outcome thinking. And process thinking is what most lawyers engage in. How do we get from A to B? What are the steps? And let's make sure those steps are as accurate and safe as possible. And so you think about due process, that's an ideal form of process thinking. And unfortunately, process thinking results in people like lawyers rejecting a lot of solutions. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're not perfect. Every step isn't perfect. Therefore, the outcome isn't perfect. Therefore, we should not use the thing at all, right? And I think one of the things that I often tell new attorneys who work in legal aid is, I know that you've been fighting for your grades and to get a perfect score on every test that you've ever taken, including in college and law school. And that's what brought you to this point because it's really hard. But guess what? Life is pass fail. And most of our clients, they see their problems as pass fail, right? They're not necessarily settling. They're not turning away solutions because they're not A+ solutions. Good enough is sometimes good enough, right? They want
Mm-hmm.
a solution to their problem, and we need to think that way and work that way. And that turns us into outcome thinkers. That's the way we should be thinking about AI, is what are the outcomes that we want in our work, right? We want, in legal services, we want someone not to be evicted. We want someone to get their benefits. We want a family to be kept together and not have someone be deported. We want someone to be paid a proper wage. So let's start from that place and work backwards and say, what are the things we can do to get the person from where they started to that solution? And then, is there a way to use AI to get there, right? That's the way to think about this. And I think that's been really challenging for lawyers. So when I build AI tools, sometimes I hear from lawyers who say, oh, it got this question wrong. I stumped it. So back to the drawing board. And I say, yeah, it got that question wrong, but it got 99 of the other 100 questions that you asked right. Why
Mm-hmm.
are lawyers incapable of seeing that side of the equation? They can only see the negative. They only see the risk, right? And that's because a lot of us are risk averse, and that's why we become lawyers. We counsel people, our clients, about risk, and we tell people what they shouldn't do. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
terrible way to solve problems. That's not the way most people solve problems. No one wakes up in the morning and says, I hope I get to meet a lawyer today. No one ever said that, right? They
I
wake
hope
up and
not.
they say, I know, yeah. They wake up and they say, I hope my problem is solved. And maybe that involves a lawyer, but guess what? I can't afford one, and it's really hard to get one. And that's the problem we should focus on.
Well, I love this. This has been such an insightful conversation. I think I've learned a couple of things along the way. AI can definitely make access to justice more accessible to people who can't afford attorneys. It allows attorneys to be more resourceful. And so I am leaving this conversation very optimistic that it can
Mhm.
actually help address the justice gap, especially in underserved communities. And so for that reason, I'm optimistic. I also think I picked up on the trend as well that there is some efficiency and some cost reduction there
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
AI can help. There's certainly, speed up, eliminate, some of the costs there. That, and again, right, should theoretically turn into more people being served, right, because of
Yeah,
the
yeah,
decreased billables, the increased affordability. Hopefully, what that will lead to is more productivity. I also think I picked up on a trend here that there is some consistency, that AI can help us leverage in this area so that we don't necessarily have to deal with some of the traps of being inconsistent, but we still do need that human element, right? We can't rely on
yeah.
AI
Mhm.
alone.
Yeah,
So I appreciate that. I also think that I picked up on, in terms of some of the ethical considerations that if we do this appropriately and we embrace AI and we are thought partners in building the tools and leveraging
exactly. Yeah,
the
yeah,
technology, we can really move from good to greatness. We can
yeah,
help eliminate some of the bias, bring in more fairness, and
yeah,
really help
yeah.
move the needle forward. I guess I will get ready to close this, Satish, with
Sure.
throwing it back to you one last time. What is our charge? What's our call to action in this space?
Yeah, I think that we have to focus on the problem, which is there's a crisis. The lawyers and the legal system are in crisis. And, that's the way that we have to look at solutions is what can help us resolve that crisis. Put yourselves in the shoes of the average American who can't afford a lawyer. How do we solve that problem? And in solving that problem, aren't we all better off? That's the charge. And AI is one way to do that. It's at hand right now. Let's do it.
Thank you, Satish. Thank you for engaging in such a thought provoking discussion. Your insights have not only deepened our understanding of AI and the ethical implications on the profession, but you've also reminded us of the ongoing commitment needed to advance civil rights and social justice. To everyone who has joined us today, thank you for being part of this important dialogue. These issues we've explored are complex and they're challenging, but by coming together in spaces like this, we've taken meaningful steps towards progress. Please remember that the work doesn't stop here. It continues with the actions we take in our communities, in our workplaces, and within the ABA in this section. I encourage you to stay engaged with the ABA's section of Civil Rights and Social Justice. Please visit our website to explore upcoming events and consider joining one of our committees to help shape the work we're doing. You can do so by visiting mbar.org backslash CRSJ. Also, please note that we do have an AI working group that you can also find more information about by visiting that website. Once again, thank you to Sateesh Nori for being here with us today. Thank you to our team behind the scenes. And of course, thank you to you all for making time to be here with us. We look forward to seeing you at our next chair chat and continuing this vital work together. Have a great day. Thank you.